Hi, boys and girls. My name is Sadiq Bello. For those of you, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to Everyday People. The show did used to be called Breakfast with Sadiq Bello, but I decided to change it because I just wanted to be quirky like that. I'm here with my second guest. Her name is Daphne. Daphne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name is Daphne Hillier-Davis. I'm an actress, French and British, and I currently live in London.
Wicked. All right. Couldn't ask for a better introduction.
So the amount of self-tapes you have to do.
Yeah, no, of course. Right. Now, I have a lot of questions in my mind that I'd like to ask you, but the first thing that I want to get down to is who is Daphne? So, like now when you just introduced yourself, you mentioned that you were from, did you say France?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
you're
correct.
from France and you moved to London. So before we talk about how long have you been in London now?
It's been a little over 2 years, I believe. So March 2021.
Okay, right. So that was
Close to 3 years.
just after lockdown, kind of.
Well, funny thing is, it was still lockdown actually.
Oh, okay.
I forgot about that part when I moved.
I see. Right. So before we get down into your life in London, I want to get into your life in France, right? So you mentioned that you were an actress, but before we get into that, how was growing up for you? Could you explain in a nutshell not in a nutshell, in as much detail as you can, who Daphne is, who do your family know you as?
It's quite an interesting question because I guess it's something that we all try to figure out as we go along, right? And growing up, I moved a lot. So a lot of people in London think, oh yeah, from France, and that's pretty much it. But I was born in the south of France, so in Toulouse. And then we moved a little bit outside of Toulouse. It was in the countryside. And that enabled me to really connect with, your child self. I felt like I'm quite grateful about the fact that I was able to play around, make, we attempted to make a plane. When we were younger. Yeah, we had all sorts of crazy ideas because I lived in the same neighborhood as my best friend, so our houses were adjacent.
Okay.
And I have a bigger brother, an older brother, so he's 1.5 years older than me, so we're quite close in age.
Yeah.
And my best friend at the time, so when I was in primary school, her big sister was my brother's age and we were the same age, so
Right.
we were always a little gang and we'd always do some crazy things. We lived by a forest, amongst fields. There was, one primary school, no secondary school, nothing. It was a tiny little village, but it felt
wow.
very safe.
Yeah.
Meaning that I could experience a lot of different things and grow up sort of in a safe environment.
Yeah.
On my own.
Did everyone sort of know each other in that sense then?
Yeah, pretty much. But we only lived there for 2 years.
Okay.
So I've got quite fond memories of... No, I'm lying. A little bit longer than that. What? Anyway, not less than 5 years, definitely, because we moved when I was 6. But, it's around that age that you start making good memories.
Yeah, your brains kind of start connecting. I moved around a lot when I was young as well, to be honest. So I find...
Oh, really?
Yeah. I did a lot of moving. I feel like from the ages of, I have no memory of like being 1, but like from the ages of 1 till 7, I'm pretty sure we moved to like 3 or 4 different houses or locations, which made it easier for me to actually be able to communicate or speak with people. But you were saying, so you said that, so I'm assuming it was like quite a tight-knit community, everyone knew each other, and you were there for less than 5 years, but do you have memory of where you were before that at all, or was that,
Yeah, so before that we were in Toulouse. It's a pretty average big town in France, I guess.
Yeah.
It was quite fun, but it was no what's it called, kindergarten?
Yeah.
I think that's the American term.
Yeah, well, I know you nursery.
Yeah, nursery. It confuses me. yeah, I was in Toulouse at that point. I have quite a few memories there. So, fun fact: when my first year of nursery, so the nursery was next to a big, what's it called, factory.
Okay.
And the factory exploded. And
What?
it was a big event in Toulouse because it was 1 week after 9/11,
Jesus.
and it killed and injured quite a few people. And that was my first memory, actually.
Of
So
that
it wasn't.
child. That's mad.
Yeah, my first memory. I don't remember it extremely clearly, but I remember it in flashes.
Yeah,
So I was in
but then
nursery.
like chaos, or not like chaos, but or like a sense of, I don't know, people being scared of, like, do you have that somewhere deep down in, like,
Yeah, very much
growing up?
so. So I was in nursery, and then they put us all in the hallway, and they told us to put some tissues above our, like, on our noses and mouths.
Yeah.
Luckily, the staff was trained in case of something happening, and the school was built accordingly. So luckily, we were not injured or anything.
Yeah.
And then
No,
sorry?
No, sorry, carry on. My mistake, yeah.
No, it's all good. And because they knew that my brother and I were obviously related, they sat my brother next to me. And I remember very clearly where he was sat. And he turned around, looked at me. Obviously, everybody was crying. We were all, under 5 years old. And he turned to me, he took my hand, he looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, "Stop crying, there's no reason for it." And we both stopped crying and just sat there. I mean, it's very dramatic, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
Because no one knew what was happening. My mum was extremely lucky at the time to be in the supermarket, so it was on her day off.
Yeah.
And I'm saying she was lucky to be there because when we went back to the flat, so when she felt the ground lift,
yeah.
And then she took the car, went straight to the nursery, picked us up. We went back to the flat, and all the windows and even the computer screen had exploded.
My God, I can honestly say I could not have expected that answer for of like what growing up was. I think you might be the only person that I've ever come across that has told, well, so far that has told me, like, a story like that, like they experienced something like that as like as a child, or like their earliest memory.
That's my very first memory.
Do you think
coming back to, sorry?
So do you think that had reason to do with you guys moving from Toulouse to like the countryside?
I think so, yes. It's hard to tell because I was too young to understand the whole politics, but I mean, partially also I think it was I think it was the plan to begin with, that my parents wanted to build a house. And typical family things, like get your own house, a little bit outside,
get married, have kids,
a little bit outside of the city, sort of have a peaceful life. So my dad's a teacher, my mum used to work in a laboratory, so I think it did play a big role, because at the time my dad used to work very far from where we were, so luckily he was not impacted by the explosion as well. My whole family was very lucky. Because most people, obviously all windows exploded, so most people had glass in their face and everything. That was pretty bad.
Oh, right.
But yeah, that was my earliest memory. And then we moved outside of Toulouse, but as I said, we didn't live there for that long, because we then moved to Réunion Island. So that's an island next to Mauritius, so completely the other side of the planet. And I lived there for close to 10 years.
Right. And did you have family in Mauritius? Like, was that...
It's not Mauritius. Oh, it's next to it.
Okay, sorry, my bad. I didn't.
That's okay.
So this is moving from Toulouse. You've moved to this sort of like countryside town, I imagine, or less than.
It's a village. It's not even a town.
Like,
it's like less than 3,000
right,
people.
in the south of France.
It's tiny.
Do you know what it is? Because every time I think of like the south of France, like, so this might just be me or just something that I've grown up with from listening to people, but I've always thought south of France was very like, I don't know, millionaires on like yachts and like big houses, and they've all got like kids go to private school, and like south of France has always been sort of described that way to me. I've never thought of it as that there was a country or like a village like sort of attached to it. So this is why I was like, oh, okay, cool, let me find out what so this is 2 moves we're talking about, not just the one, I'm imagining.
Yeah. And you know what, it's super interesting what you're saying, because it's funny to see how it's seen from people that are not from France, because I guess a lot of people know Cannes and Nice and you know, Marseille, and these are what in France we say are they like
tape à l'œil? Okay, is that French for bougie?
A little, yeah, sort
or like
of,
okay, not bougie, like maybe middle class. I don't know, is that like the right term?
No, it's not to say middle class. It's more to express tape à l'œil. If you translate it literally, it means to hit the eye, and it's, you know, when there's these big shiny things and it hits your eyes. So it's quite like, have you seen me kind of thing.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, I love shiny things.
No, I get you. I was looking at it more as when you said hit the eye, I thought of it more as like, oh, the target that everyone wants to hit. But what you're actually saying, it's more of, it's something that maybe the eye can't avoid. Like you see it, and you're like, oh look, this is like a moth to a flame, and you're like, oh yeah, cool, I need to go to this light and or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? So everyone is kind of like, is their goal like to end, or in France, is their goal to end up like having a house in, I don't know, Marseille or like Nice or some beautiful place?
No, not really.
No?
I mean, I would say that most of France is quite, you know, there's most of the south of France, at least, it's a lot of countryside. These places are quite separate, and also where I grew up is quite far away from it geographically, because Toulouse is closer to Spain, and all of these places, so Nice and Cannes, for example, are closer to Italy. So we're on completely different sides of France. I can't speak for the people that live over there. I've been there, and it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most pretty places that I've ever been. But in the rest of France, it's not. No one says, "Oh my God, I have to live in Cannes or Nice," because it's quite seasonal during the summer and spring. It's amazing. And you know, there's the Cannes Festival, there's all of that. But the rest of the year, I mean, it's Cannes itself, for example, it's quite quiet.
Okay. Do you know what, right? This is going to sound so ignorant of me, but it's only just now that you just mentioned that the Cannes Film Festival was there. I've always thought of like the Cannes Film. I don't know why. I always think that the Cannes Film Festival was in Italy. I know it sounds crazy.
I mean, close.
Yeah, but it's only.
Hello?
It's not Italy, but I don't know why. I always sort of related it to Italian cinema, even though that doesn't make any sense. So for anyone listening, that's just my ignorance. Like, apologies for that. But yeah, so sorry. Now, in fact, it's a great segue, because now that we're on Cannes Film Festival, we're going to talk about your acting career, or your acting career. Yeah. All right, your acting career. What I'll do is I'm going to play a couple of what's it called? I'm going to play a couple of songs, and then we'll return and we'll discuss your acting career. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. One sec. Okay, so we're back for those of you who are locked in, it's Everyday People with Sadiq Bello, and I'm here with Daphne Hillier-Davis, who was just talking to me about growing up in France, and we didn't get too tough into her moving over to London, but we're about to get into that now and talk about her acting career. And so, Daphne, do you want to say hi to the people?
Hi again. I'm still here, and yeah.
Cool, nice to know. Okay, so before we get into your acting career, so you mentioned about coming from France. We left off and said coming from France and moving over to the UK, right?
Yes,
right.
More or less.
But before moving over to the UK in 2021, you had frequently been sort of visiting, moving over, or like coming for holiday?
Yeah, so I'm half French, half British.
Right.
So my dad is from London, meaning that his entire family lives in London. Well, yes, mostly. Most of them live in London. So ever since I was born, we have been used to going to visit them in London. So when I lived in France, I would go approximately once a year, just to visit, say hi, sometimes twice a year, in the summer or Christmas. And then when we moved to Réunion Island, because that is much, much further away, so that's a 12-hour flight.
Wait, you said Réunion Island?
Yeah, La Réunion.
Oh, Lorraine. Sorry, it's the French accent. So I thought you meant Iranian, as in like.
No, and that's
what?
Which is why in England I always say the island, because each time I say Iranian, everyone's like, "Oh my God, you're Iranian." I'm like, no, not at all. It's Reunion.
Reunion.
Like a reunion.
Oh, like a reunion. Oh, reunion. Okay.
Reunion.
Yeah,
I just struggle to say it.
You haven't seen someone in a while and say, "Oh, look, we're going to reunite." Reunion.
Yeah, pretty much. In French, it's called La Réunion.
Okay.
That also
Réunion.
means
cool.
The meeting.
Right.
And it's a French department, but it's overseas. Right. So it's in between Madagascar and Mauritius, pretty much.
Oh, okay. That makes sense now. Cool.
But you can imagine that's very far away.
Yeah.
So we would go back to London maybe once every 2 years.
Right.
3 years.
Wait, Madagascar's like near... isn't that like near the bottom of Africa? Or like...
Yeah, it's South Africa, yeah.
That's quite a distance.
Yeah, which is why it's like a 12-hour flight, that's a bit long.
Right. So you would frequently do this 12-hour flight growing up, I imagine, from the UK to La Réunion, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna butcher it. I'm not gonna the way that you say it with like this really cool French accent, right? But
you know what? A for effort.
A for
a lot of people don't try. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, La Réunion. Right. So you go from the UK to La Réunion growing up, 12-hour flight. You have family in both places?
No, so only my parents, my brother and I moved to La Réunion.
Okay.
We don't have any family there. So my mum was originally from there. So she was born there, but she was adopted in France.
Okay.
So her family is in the south of France, and my dad's family is in London. So we were the only ones there.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, so so I'm assuming that means I kind of know this already, but it's mainly for the listeners listening. You're of mixed heritage. So if your mum's from Madagascar, I'm assuming she's Black, African. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not part of Madagascar. It's very hard because it's lost in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So each time I say what it's close to sort of help people visualize on the globe, but it's not from any of these places. It's just a random island.
Yeah, just like in the middle of somewhere. Because I was going to look at it as so when you mentioned near, like on the other side of Madagascar, or like in the middle of the Indian Ocean, I'm assuming it's part of the African continent but maybe owned by the French. That's kind of how I looked at it when you just mentioned it being in the Indian Ocean. Is that a correct description, or?
it's not part of the African continent.
Okay.
Because it so you know how like it was a volcano that erupted from sea and it just became an island over time.
Okay.
So it's independent because it's part of France. It's actually, it belongs to France. Like we have the French school system, the same president.
Yeah.
It's just another department that's completely
the
on the other side of the planet.
Okay. I'm actually I'm looking at a map now as we speak, and I can kind of see where it's at. Yeah, it's okay. So it's not. Yeah, it's near Madagascar, but it's literally a tiny island. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I say near, it's very proximate because it's not that close to it. You can't swim to it. It'll take a couple of hours on the plane.
Okay.
Maybe, I'm not quite sure. I've not been to Madagascar, but I'm guessing 3 hours.
Yeah. Right. So, sorry I interrupted. Yeah, so carry on. So, when you were growing up, you would frequently fly from this place, back and forth to the UK, but family moved there. Yeah.
So it's quite interesting because then that means that when we lived in France, we had our French family around us, and we only had to travel to London to see the rest of the family. But now that meant that we had to sort of split every single holiday in two, partially to go to France and then partially to go to the UK, so we could see everyone and make sure everybody's happy.
Right.
And it was very nice, of course, to see everyone. I don't mean it in a bad way at all. It's just a required
like,
part of organisation.
We have to. Like, we didn't.
It's like, oh no, not again. But that's how we would do it. Generally, we tend to go during the summer, just because it's easier that way, and most people have longer holidays during the summer.
Yeah.
And that's the winter on the island because the summer and winter are inverted.
Right.
So during
the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah.
Yeah. So during our winter, we'd go to European summer and go there. So I'm quite used to London, but it's different living here because, you know, when you're here as a tourist, although you're also with family, it's completely different. You don't need to know all, you know, what's the best network provider and all the slang words, because you only speak with people from your family, so you all speak the same way. Yeah,
you see it from the eyes of, like, it's kind of like anywhere that you go on holiday. That's how I always find that when I go on holiday to places, I feel like I don't really know the country in the way that I would know it if I was living there, because when you're visiting, you only see like the highlights or like a few spots. Whereas when you maybe when you were coming with your family, for instance, you would spend time in, I don't know, like Marble Arch, Knightsbridge, Oxford Circus, or whatever. Whereas living here now, you kind of get the depth of, you know, like maybe somewhere like White City or like I don't know, Clerkenwell or Brixton or Camden, and like you see more of London, and you also understand the culture probably a bit better than when you were visiting as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting to see that my dad tried to give us as many cultural references as he could, because he grew up in London as well. Yeah. And, you know, tried to teach us some of the slang that he knows. Yeah. But all of this has changed so much, because last time he lived in London was something like 30 years ago.
Right. And so he's full on like British. Does he speak, I'm assuming he speaks French?
He does, with a British accent.
Okay. And I'm assuming he would have learned that or picked it up either from your mum or just from like living in France before meeting your mum or whatnot. So he's like, there will be words. Do you think that there's French words that, for instance, you and your brother and your mum might understand that your dad may not necessarily understand? Or does he speak it fluently, just with a British accent?
He speaks it fluently. It's just with a British accent, pretty much. The only one word that I still get him to trip up on is meringue.
Meringue.
Because he can say it, but do you think it's un meringue or une meringue?
I'd say une meringue.
You're correct.
Boomerang,
It's
yeah.
boomerang.
But he
But
goes,
for some
like,
reason,
"Bro, can I
that's the
boomerang, mate?"
one word.
Yeah.
After 30 years, he cannot remember if it's un or une. But
Mm.
he's actually probably better at French than I am, because I think partially because he's a teacher as well.
Yeah, lived there like before you were born. So
Yeah, and he moved to France to be with my mum. When he moved, he could not speak French because, fun fact, he learned French in school, but then he dropped out and decided to learn German because he
right,
thought, I will never need French in my entire life.
yeah, he got married to someone who spoke French, yeah, and had children.
Yeah.
What's the word? So did they? Okay, so he met. I'm assuming they met in France. It wasn't that, or did they meet in the UK and then they moved to France, and then you ended up being born in France? Do you?
Yeah, so they met in London.
Oh, okay.
Because my mum always loved the English language, so
Okay.
she speaks English relatively well.
Mm.
And so she did an exchange program. So when she was in London, her pen pal had a brother, and that is not my dad.
All right.
But so her brother invited his best friend over for dinner, and his best friend was my dad.
Ah, okay.
And so that's how they met, so quite young.
My...
And then they corresponded every day via letter.
Yeah.
For I think a year, if I remember correctly.
My...
And then she had to do her exams because she was in uni.
Yeah.
And she said, if I fail my exams, I will move to London. If I pass them, you will come to France. And she did pass.
That's
so
in way to me. That is like everything that you were telling me in this conversation is really fascinating. Like to you, you say it like, you know, it's normal. Like, oh yeah, cool. So like I was a child and like, you know, there was like an explosion of a movie. But it's all, everything you were saying, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody else who has ever told me their life story in this way. But yeah, thanks for like, you know, actually having the time to do this, by the way, and actually voicing and saying all these things, because it's like, it's some of it are like pretty intimate questions, but I like, this is the whole point of like the podcast and the show, is to, I like to ask people things to find out information that they wouldn't necessarily say, as well as, you know, they create, because I'm trying to understand where your creative background came from and you know, what got you into acting and that stuff. But to understand that, I need to know you as a person. So thanks for answering these questions.
Honestly, it's an absolute pleasure, and I truly mean this. Like when you gave me the idea, when you were like, "Hey, I would love you to be on my podcast," I automatically said yes because it's so fun.
Yeah,
I'm having a lot of fun. So thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. What's called? All right, so yeah, so they move over, they go to France, and then long story short, you and your brother were born, and you, if I get this right, you were in Toulouse, moved to the countryside, from the countryside, traveling back and forth between the UK and Reunion, and then you settled. Well, now you personally have settled in London for, I guess, the unforeseeable future, however long you stay here. Does that kind of bring us up to date?
Yeah, so basically we were in the south of France, moved to the countryside, moved to the island, back and forth with the UK. I moved back to the south of France, but a different area to study. But in the meantime, while I was on the island, I also lived in Germany for a bit, but that's not that important because it wasn't that long. But anyway, and then I moved to London, so here I am. Here
you are. Okay, so we're gonna play some music, and then we're gonna get into your life in London.
Amazing. Yeah? See you later.
Good, yeah. All right, guys, gonna play some music for you now, and then we'll be back shortly with Daphne. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that you're listening, just playing some tunes to wake you up in the morning. If you're just tuning in and catching up, I am speaking to Daphne Hillier-Davis, and we are talking about her life of growing up in France and moving from back and forth between the UK and La Reunion. I don't know if I said it correctly. La Reunion, and then from La Reunion, she went over to Germany to study for a little bit, and then went back to the south of France, but to a different part to study for a little bit, and then now she's back in London, where I met her and asked her to come into my podcast, because for those of you who don't know, we know each other because we work together, and so here she is on Everyday People, which used to be called Breakfast with Sadiq Bello, but it's also now available on Voices Radio. You can also listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, and basically everywhere that podcasts stream. But it's available on Voices Radio Thursday, the first Thursday of every single month. And Daphne is my second guest. So Daphne Hillier-Davis, would you like to say hello to the audience once again?
Hi everyone. If you have not listened to the first part of the podcast, I would recommend doing so and hear about some crazy story from France.
All right, so now let's get into the artist side of you, the creative side. In the trajectory of your life, do you remember the first moment where you decided, I'm going to be an actress? Was there a defining moment that made you want to pursue that career?
So the answer to that question is yes and no.
Right.
Yes, I remember one moment where I made the executive decision that that's what I'm going to do, but it was only a realization that it made sense for all this time. Basically, I remember exactly where I was. I was in school, very boring. I was 12 years old, and I was a little bit of a loner at the time. Had my best friend, still my best friend. She's the best, shout out. And
shout out best friend, TT.
Yeah, and for a long time I said that I was going to be a writer, and then I said I was going to be a teacher. And then suddenly, I can't remember what my train of thought was exactly. But I thought, I love like filming and all of that. And then I was like, well, that makes total sense. I should be an actress. Because ever since I could speak, I've always done it unconsciously. So apparently, and that's my parent telling me the story, I can't even remember that. When I was in nursery, I had a lot of plush toys. So when I would come back from nursery, I'd put all of my plush toys in specific places in my room, and I would reenact everything that happened that day. So I would be the teacher, and my parents said it was quite fun because they could know who has been punished, all of that. Anyway,
right.
And I would just do it on my own. And then my grandparents had a camera, an old camera, and you can see footage somewhere, probably on a hard drive, of myself and my brother just filming ourselves. And I would make little videos, and I'd pretend to be a journalist, and I would always do that. And when I was in school, so in secondary school, as I mentioned, I was a bit of a loner, a little bit of a nerd, if you will. And after school, I would do one of two things. Number one, I would either go to the public library and spend as much time as I could there until they closed, just to read. And number two, if I was not in the public library, I would get my dad's iPad and I would film little music videos with, I think it was called Movie Star at the time.
Right.
And I would just do this all the time.
Was Movie Star like a program?
Yeah, it was an application where you could put any music that was in your library,
right.
or I think they even had their own library, and you could put effects, you could do slow-mo, you could, add so many things, and to me that was a revelation. So
the TikTok.
Yeah, pretty much
back in the day. Yeah.
So I would spend my entire free time doing this, and then I would also force my friends to be in my little videos. I would make adverts, and then I would write scripts of ideas that I had, and then it became a little bit more, concrete in what I call high school, but I can't remember the English term.
Yeah. Like, well, like middle school, secondary school, I imagine.
When you're from 15 to 18.
Oh yeah, we just call that like sixth form, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or like some, like there'll be college, but not like American college. Like Americans call university college, whereas we call college. And sixth form is if you don't go to college. So between that, like 15 to 18 before you go to uni. Yeah, that's like sixth form. Yeah.
I find the system here so confusing. Also, college is the term that French people use to say secondary school.
Yeah, that's nuts.
It's so very confusing to me, especially when you grow up watching American films and then your dad's British but you live in France.
Yeah.
It's just like
yeah, like I don't know, you're a cocktail of mixes.
Yeah, but yeah, anyway, in sixth form, each time we had a project to do, because I wanted to study cinema, but we didn't have that option in school, so I studied literature.
Okay.
So German literature.
Oh, cool.
That was my speciality for A levels.
Yeah.
So it's like German literature and advanced German, and then you have to do French literature and history and all of that. Basically, no sciences.
Yeah. Aren't the Germans really good at like making films? I feel like, I don't know why I have that in my.
Weirdly enough, I'm not super versed in the German cinematography. Like, from what I know, it's not that big.
Okay, yeah, just because when you said German literature, I automatically thought of like black and white movies from like the 50s or whatever, and I don't know why I seem to think like Germans were like really good at that, or there's some relationship between France and Germany based on films. I don't know. It's good, to be honest. It could be just.
Maybe not in the 50s. But...
not in the 50s. Yeah, not then. There was like some cold stuff happening back then. I mean, they didn't really like each other, but yeah, I seem to feel like when you just said German literature, they either there's like really good, I don't know, like German folk tales or like stories or something like that, or maybe it's just my mind making up, connecting dots.
In terms of stories, yes, I would say the literature side of things in Germany is incredible.
Right.
Cinematographically, so I did not study that in school.
Yeah.
We really stuck to books and paintings.
Yeah.
But in uni, so when I studied cinematography in university, we mainly studied French cinematography because that's where cinema started.
Yeah.
So I'm not the best person to ask about the German cinematography.
That's fine.
But I never really heard that much about it for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not super cultured. Who knows? No,
I mean, do you know what? It could be me. I could just be because, you know, a minute ago you were talking about the Reunion Island and I said Iran. So it could be me that doesn't know stuff, and I'm actually just confused in the things that you're aware of. But to take you off course, you were saying so you studied German literature.
Yes, and so because it was quite an artsy course in general, it means that we had a lot of projects to do and we're quite free of how we could do it. So a lot of the time I would make videos, and then we had the sort of film festival for the school, which was really fun. And same, I would sort of make videos, and I made a promotional video from the dance club because I was also part of the dance club. So everything that I could do in the video form, I would do it.
You'd put it into like a video, I guess, and force your friends to be in it. Exactly,
I would just force everyone to be in it.
Shout out those friends, you know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for putting up with me all this time.
Cool.
But it's quite.
Sorry, if you don't mind me asking, were you were writing these like scripts or I guess or plots or whatnot? Like you were basically directing the videos, I imagine, that you were shooting, or were you reenacting stuff you'd saw already?
Yes, so I would write everything.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of, creativity in general, and I used to write books but
sick.
I realize now that I wrote them because I could see the film in my head. So I didn't really write great books, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm still doing something.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have much of a choice because no one else wanted to take part, which is totally fair. So I would generally write the script, film it, edit it, be in it. I would do everything on my own. But it's quite interesting that at the time, so when I started saying that I wanted to be an actress, there's a big stereotype, and I don't know if it's a French thing or if it's just where I was.
Yeah.
But it just came. People had some strange reactions to that statement. You know, anyone would say, "Hey, I want to be a teacher in a few years," and everybody's like, "Oh, great for you! I want to be a doctor. That's amazing. You're good at math." But when I would say I want to be an actress, people are like, "Oh, you just want to be famous." I was like, no, that's not the point.
Yeah, they don't. But you know what? I always say this to creatives, because my dad told me this when he said, like, so for instance, like I have the mind of an artist, and most creatives do, as you would yourself. You have the mind of an artist, and so telling the other people who are around you might have the brain or the mind of like a scientist or a mathematician, and so they can't understand when you say, "Oh, you want to be an artist." Like, to them, it doesn't make sense, because in the world of a mathematician or a scientist, there always kind of has to be an end result. So like if a scientist is running an experiment, the point of that experiment is to find a solution or an answer to a problem. And the same with maths. When you do 1 + 1, you're looking for a solution to find 2. Whereas when you say you want to be an actress or you want to be a creative, sometimes just doing they can't understand that you write in a script or write in a movie or shoot in a movie, even if no one sees it or pays you £1 million or $1 million or €1 million for it, the joy actually comes from creating the movie. So a part of them probably feels like when you say, "Oh, I want to be an actress," they're like, "Well, if you're not trying to be a millionaire, why are you doing it?" Maybe that's how
That, you know what, that is such a good way of putting it, because all these years I was like, why does everybody say this? Like the end goal is like, it's not fame. That's not why we do art. It's never to be famous. If not, we would not do it, because it's so unlikely that would happen.
Exactly. And not even just so unlikely, but like it takes a long time. Like you could have said, "Oh, I'm going to start acting at 12," and you might not be a millionaire till 85. And so if your goal was to be a millionaire, then you would spend like 60 something years miserable because you haven't reached the solution of what you want. And so the whole point, and for me anyway as well, I get like, even as a DJ or like as a musician, the point of creating the art is the creativity part of it. For me anyway, is the release. It's like, oh look, I just made something dope, and that's it. If it ends up, making me a lot of money, then yeah, cool, that's a bonus, and I'm not going to turn it down. But
exactly,
the thing that you actually enjoy is writing. Like you were saying, you just, even as a child, when you were using Movie Star and telling your friends, "Let's act in this video," like you just wanted to act, and you just wanted to write and shoot a movie initially, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the process of music videos, because it meant that I did not have to write any dialogue.
Yeah.
So I think when I was starting, because it's something that's so hard to do, right? With music videos, obviously sometimes some of them have dialogue in them, but you can generally base everything on what the music is telling you and sort of put that into images. So when you're starting off, I think that was a really good way for me to get used to the visual concepts that I had in mind.
Yeah.
But yes, I cannot tell you the amount of scripts that I have written and that have never been made. Every single month I'd probably come up with something new and tell my friends, "Oh, so this is what's going to happen, you're going to play this is where we're going to film it," and then it would just obviously never happen. But that's also part of the creative process, and it's fun looking back on it, because I still have almost all of those scripts, and it's fun looking at them and thinking, wow, this is really bad, but I can see that I've grown a lot, and I still have a lot of improvement to make.
Yeah.
But it's all a journey, and it's so great. That's something I love about art, is that you get to see where you started and where you are now.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of music now, and then I'll do some mixing just for the crowd, and then we'll get into the last segment about. I'd like to actually get into what your. I know we just said like, oh, we enjoyed the journey and the creative process, but I wanted to get into if there is any sort of end goal, or when you would feel as though, like, is there something that you actually want to make, that you're working towards making, maybe like a full-length feature film, or like a West End show or something like that, or any projects that you may have coming up that you want us to look forward to. And so we'll get into that in the next segment. Is that cool? I'll just play some music now.
Yeah, perfect.
Wicked. All right, guys, I'll do some DJing for you. I hope you've been enjoying everything you're hearing so far, and we'll be back shortly. Okay. Welcome to the last segment of Everyday People with myself, Sadiq Bello. I'm interviewing my guest today, Daphne Hillier, who I've really enjoyed this conversation with, by the way. Daphne.
Thank you. Same.
Yeah, no, this is really amazing. For those of you who don't know, like, I know, I've known Daphne now for quite a while, probably about 2, maybe 3 years, something like that.
Close to 3 years, yeah.
Close to 3 years. And I think this is probably one of the most in-depth conversations we've actually had. So this is part of the reason why I actually asked you to come on, so that I can, because I like having these conversations with people, because I think I get to know a deeper or better version of them, as opposed to the everyday sort of exterior that you see on a day-to-day basis. Like, you, with all the like work and cost of living and like just time, you never actually get the time to sit down and talk to people anymore. And even if you're in like a social setting where you're in a party or something out, you don't get the time to sit down, unless it's the after party and it's 4 a.m. and everyone's gone home.
And then you get into real deep things.
Yeah, then you get real deep. So yeah, this is what we're talking about. Now, of all the things that you have mentioned, in regards to you growing up in France, moving to the UK, going back and forth to all these countries, and then deciding to become an artist, or like, you know, write scripts to be an actress and stuff. Where is the do you have like any end goal? Is there a particular thing that you're reaching for, I don't know, before you retire or your life comes to an end, or anything like that? Like, what would you want to be remembered for as a human being?
That is such a tough question. Weirdly enough, I try not to ask myself that too much, because I feel like I am someone who puts a lot of goals and set deadlines for myself. And the problem is that obviously life happens, and things might not go the way that you intend them to go to. And then, as a perfectionist, that frustrates me because I've always had those very set goals. You know, I'm going to study cinematography for this amount of years, then I'm going to go to London, I'm going to live in West London, and I'm going to do everything on my own. I'm going to study acting over there, and etc. So I have those ideas, and I always try to do everything in my power to meet them. But recently I realized that it's not sometimes the healthiest thing you can do, because then that means that I tend to not live in the present moment, and I get disappointed very easily with myself if I don't achieve what I said I would achieve in a certain amount of time.
I hear that. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are so many things that I do want to achieve. I mean, I did say that I would publish a book by the time I would turn 18. I'm now 24, so that's not happening.
Yeah.
But I also make my own short films. Okay. And there is a short film that is currently being rewritten by a scriptwriter.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that I could turn this into a feature.
Okay.
But it requires a lot of I mean, it's a very lengthy process, right? The pre-production state of things. And I don't know if it will ever become a feature film, because by that time I might grow out of it and think and think that I could do better things. But in terms of acting, I mean, if they do other Hunger Games films, I would absolutely love to play the main character or even a character in a Hunger Games film. I do not know why, but these books impacted me when I was a teenager, because I read the books. I think I read all of the books a month before the films came out.
Oh, okay.
And so I discovered the books right before the films, which is perfect. And I was quite happy about how they made them into films, because a lot of the time when you read books, because I used to read a lot of the times the films just are not very accurate, and they don't represent the books very well, I feel like. But I was very pleased with Hunger Games. So I don't know, and there's something about Jennifer Lawrence in that role as Katniss Everdeen that really, really moved me, and I thought, that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do.
Do you see yourself as like like the character that Jennifer Lawrence plays in your own life, in real life? Are you like, do you resonate with that? Is that the kind of person that you are? Is that who Daphne is in the real world? No,
I wouldn't say so. Katniss Everdeen is very, she's quite feisty. Like she reacts in, like, she's a little bit of a rebel, I would say. She even though she doesn't mean to most of the time, when she's annoyed, she'll react quite impulsively and be quite arrogant in a way that I absolutely love. But I would say that I'm not like this. I'm way too scared of consequences. I'm a little bit more tame.
So the reason why I ask this, right, I don't like, is because, so I feel like people always see themselves, so like there's the way that you see yourself, and then I think there's the way that other people in the world might see you that you may not have an idea of until people tell you. But like, so now the things that you've mentioned about Jennifer Lawrence's character in Hunger Games, and her being, very feisty and fiery and like a bit of a rebel, so you have to be very brave to be that kind of person. And you now saying that you don't feel like you were that person, or you're not that kind of person, for me, right, that's a little bit of what's the word, is it an oxymoron or something? Like when things don't like, or like our views don't align. But I'll tell you the reason why, because of everything that you've said to me in the past hour of how you've moved. Like, first of all, let's get into the fact that you moved from France to the UK, and you've basically built a life here of your own in the past few years that you've been here. You did it at a time that was very uncertain, which was lockdown, and while everybody around you, friends and family members, were maybe pursuing a career in I don't know, being a teacher, being a doctor, being something that was like sustainable or could prove to be stable in the future, you decided that you wanted to pursue your career, your creative aspects, and become an actress. So see, I look at all of those things as being brave, or like being rebellious, even though you wouldn't. Like, has anyone ever said like that? You see what I mean?
It's very fascinating to hear that, because even when I say, just moved here on my own, and then I don't know if you're aware, but I'm planning on moving to Canada. And
no, I didn't know that. But
I clearly can't stay in one place for too long. But everyone's like, "Oh, that's great. Do you know anyone in Canada?" I'm like, "No, I just feel like moving there." And they're like, "Oh, have you been there to Toronto?" And I'm like, "No, don't know, just feel like it." And everybody always says the same word since I've been in the UK. Everybody says, "Wow, that's very brave." And it's interesting, because I never saw this as a brave thing. To me, it's just, I feel like doing it, I'm just going to do it. It's a little bit reckless, I'll grant you that. but
I feel like that's why you resonate with her, because even though you might not see yourself as this brave, rebellious kind of character, other people around you might, because you are doing things that we would only talk about or think about doing. Like, I'm pretty sure even if you spoke to I don't know, Beyonce. I don't think Beyonce wakes up in the morning and sees herself as like, oh my God, I am Beyonce. She probably just sees herself as a normal human being, but everybody around her sees her as Beyonce. And so that could be the same thing for you. Although you might see yourself as, oh yeah, no, I'm just like this chill girl that's like just Daphne. But to the rest of us, or at least to me, after this conversation, I'm like, no, you are actually, maybe you are, maybe there is a bit of Jennifer Lawrence in you, and that's why would like to play that character, because somewhere in your subconscious you are that person in your life, whether you realize it or not. But I think it's a very brave thing to do, to move like to a different country, kind of on your own, build your own life, and then do the same thing again. Like most people would do it once. Maybe you've done it well, you did it when you were growing up, and then you've done it once now and you're planning to do it again. So I think you should give yourself some credit. Like, it's quite a brave, rebellious thing to do.
Thank you. I'm gonna describe myself as Daphne the Rebel from now on. AKA has been compared to Beyonce and Jennifer Lawrence on Sadiq's podcast. So yeah, that's my new bio, guys. Yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, I think in acting it's quite interesting when there's a role that I want to do. It's a lot about the challenge of it as well, right? Because sometimes it's really fun when you do identify to the person, but I would say that from time to time it's even more fun when you do not identify to the person. Like if you play a psychopath, right?
Yeah.
I hope that I do not come across as a psychopath. But it's so fun because you get to experiment new things, and you have to get into that character's sort of mindset and body, and you have to find ways to link it to things that you can relate to emotionally most of the time. But it's so interesting. It's such a great challenge that I don't know. It's amazing. I love it.
I mean, I think it's safe to say we found what it is that makes you want to be an actress. Like but it's interesting for you to portray, other people, like to pick up their mannerisms or be in their mindset and explore this story, and then you be the person to play that out, and be somebody else. So,
well, I mean, if I would say one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's what I think is fascinating with acting is actually how you can make people feel a certain thing. So when we watch a film, we all know that it's full fiction, right? We know the violin in the background is here to make you cry, and suddenly it's raining out of nowhere, and we know that it's all fake. The wind is probably a fan and everything, and yet we still watch it. We still go to the cinema. We still watch films. We still enjoy it. We laugh with the characters. We cry with them. We grieve certain characters, and I think it's all a process. Every little piece comes into the puzzle, but acting is part of that. And if I'm able to make someone feel something, although they know it's not real, that's cherry on top.
That's it. That's the goal. That's what we like. All right. And then now, as a final question, just for Bants, which I like to ask all of my guests that come on, if you could meet with or have dinner with any person, dead or alive, celebrity, normal person, biblical figure from any of the holy books, the Quran, the Torah, or whatnot, who would you meet and what question would you ask them?
I've had this question before, and I never quite knew who I would pick.
Right.
You know what? The first thought that came into mind when you asked this question was my great granddad, Roy.
Okay.
I never got to meet him. He passed away when my brother was less than 1 year old.
Right.
1 year old, sorry. And yeah, he seems like an interesting man from what I've heard. So maybe I would just ask him about his life, like you just did with me. Nice.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, that was very interesting. I've enjoyed this conversation. We've run out of time now because it's coming to the hour. But I'm glad that we got to do this, because then I found out a lot more about you than I thought I knew. I sort of knew the basics of, like, you being French and or like half French and half British and so forth, and your mum, and like I knew bits and bobs of you, but I feel like I got to dive a little bit deeper into who Daphne Hillier-Davis is as a person. And so thanks for giving me your time.
And thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this, so anytime.
Excellent. All right, guys, as I mentioned, it's Sadiq Bello, and this was Everyday People with Daphne Hillier-Davis signing out. I hope
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.